Welcome to this special serve lesson. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into the serve placement for a lot of different professional players. A week ago, I published a video where I broke down the serve of Roger Federer, and I talked about how he lets his toss drop a pretty significant amount before making contact. And I kind of debunked the myth a little bit that you need to hit the ball at the top of your toss, or maybe even on the way up, which has been suggested many times over the years by coaches and players. And I got a lot of response. I actually challenged viewers to let me know, are there any players out there that actually do hit at the peak of the toss? And there's over 100 comments on that video. And today we're going to be looking at video from Roscoe Tanner, Alexander Dolgopolov, Andy Roddick, Arthur Ashe, Bernard Tomic, Dustin Brown, Sam Groth, Janko Tipsarevic, and Roger Federer again in match play, an actual point play scenario. And just to really quickly review, the whole point for me was that it's not so much about where in the toss we're making contact, but a smooth and efficient and flowing rhythm. I think that's the most important thing. Not that the ball has to be hit on the way up or at the peak or after dropping 8 inches or whatever it is. I think the rhythm and the smoothness and the efficiency of the motion should be first and foremost the most important part. And then the serve toss and height and how much it drops really should follow along with that. And among professional players, you see all kinds of different rhythms. So first and foremost, let's take a look at Roger Federer. We had Top Tennis Training jump in. It was great to hear from them. And Simon mentioned that he thought that the toss drop was different for Roger during match play. In practice play, we saw him take a big step forwards. We saw him foot fault. And so there was some suggestion in the comments, including from Simon, that he doesn't let it drop as much in match play when he's doing his real serve. So here's some Federer match play footage. And you see that same tossing arm going along the baseline. He is not taking the big step forwards in front of the baseline. And so let's go ahead and make our mark. Here's the very top of the toss right here. So there's our mark for the top of the toss. And now let's go ahead and play forwards, play forwards, play forwards, play forwards. And there's contact right there. We'll draw another line right there at contact. And for me, I mean, without being like super scientific and figuring out exactly what the amount of drop is, this again looks really close to a full racket length, which is over 2 feet of drop. A lot of discussion and debating in the comments of the last video about how it might drop a little bit, but there's no way it can drop more than a couple inches or 6 inches without there being tremendous difficulty in timing and dealing with the ball dropping super, super fast. And I don't see that. 6 inches is small among professional players. And we'll see a couple more examples here from people guessing that, oh, maybe this person was at the peak of the toss. And Federer here in match play, this is point play against Tommy Haas. You'll see him land, go into a split step, and he's getting ready for the next point, for the next shot in the points. Still letting it drop for sure over a foot. I think right around 2 feet is what Roger's letting it drop. So let's go forward and move on to some other players. Here's the serve of Alexander Dolgopolov, and he was the one that was by far the most mentioned in the comments, so I wanted to go ahead and start with him. And he has a very quick serve rhythm, no pause or slow down at all into his trophy pose. And so let's check out where he is exactly. So we'll pause right at the peak of his toss, which is right here. Ball's just kind of hanging there, and we'll draw a line like we did before. So there's the line at the peak of the toss. And as he comes up towards contact, you'll see it's just dropping slightly. It's very, very close to the top of the toss. I'll just go ahead and just leave that line there. You can see how the ball comes up to that line, floats there for a fraction of a second before it starts to drop. So Alexander, his ball's only dropping an inch or two. It's tiny. It's among modern servers, for me, definitely the closest to actually hitting at the very peak of the toss. Consistently, his ball does drop a couple inches, but it's very, very minimal. There's not much drop at all. And his rhythm, when you watch him in full speed, you would kind of assume that, oh, he's got to be hitting that on the way up, because there's no pause at all in his trophy pose after he's coiled, after he's loaded. He's immediately going up towards the ball. So it's a very quick rhythm, a very fast rhythm. Next, we'll take a look at Andy Roddick. This was another really common one in the comments. And I had a really hard time finding good footage of Andy showing the entire serve without it being like actual tournament match play. But you can see here on this clip from Fuzzy Old Balls, thanks Will for letting us use this clip here. You see the ball leave the frame before he even gets into his full loaded position. And on his way up towards the point of contact, you'll see the ball fall back into the frame again. So here, between the point of contact and the edge of the video clip here is a solid 6 or 7 inches. I'm guessing he was probably 1.5 feet or so at the very peak of his toss down to the point of contact. I could do a little further analysis on Andy here, but this is the best slow motion I could find showing the ball falling down to contact. And it's clear the ball is significantly higher at its very peak than it is right here at contact. Definitely over 1 foot. I would say probably about 1.5 feet. Next, we have another modern player that got mentioned a lot, and that's Bernard Tomic. A lot of people mentioning his serve as being at the peak of the toss. We'll go ahead and pause right there. There's the very peak of his toss path. We'll draw a line there again. So there's our peak of the toss line, and we'll continue forwards. He's actually dropping a pretty significant amount. I mean, relative to what a lot of people are claiming. A lot of people were thinking he's at the peak of his toss, but he's making contact right around, I would say it's probably a solid 8 or 10 inches of drop of the toss. So quite a bit of dropping happening there. It's interesting to see it in slow motion, and these are the kinds of things that analyzing video for years I've been noticing as when I watch full speed of Bernard serving, yes, he's got a very quick rhythm, he's got a very quick motion. And so relative to a Federer or a Nadal, it might be easy to assume that, oh, he must hit all the way at the very peak because he's moving so much faster. And Bernard is over on towards that end of the spectrum. But it just kind of goes to show how much we're missing between the lines when we don't slow things down and actually look at the reality of what's happening, both in our own games and in the professional game. It's easy to make assumptions unless you actually go frame by frame and check out what's happening in real life. Janko Tipsarevic was another modern player. I think he just retired recently that a lot of people mentioned. His toss on this, it was tough to find clips of him. His toss is just outside the frame here, just at the very edge, so we won't need to draw a line for that one. So at the very edge is where the peak of his toss is, and here's where he's making contact. I would say it's about 10 or 12 inches or so of drop. Dustin Brown, serve and volleyer, super exciting player to watch. He's another person that got mentioned several times. We'll go ahead and pause right at the peak right there, and we'll draw a line and check out where he makes contact. He's pretty close. He's quite a bit higher than Bernard Tomic was or Tipsarevic was. This looks to me like 4 inches or so, maybe 4 or 5 inches. So not quite as far towards the peak as Dolgopolov, but definitely far over towards that end of the spectrum of having a very quick rhythm. It'd be super easy to assume that he's making contact at the top of his toss in full time. Last modern player here before we get into some old school clips. This is Sam Groth, who has I believe the current world record for fastest serve. And we saw quite a few comments calling him out as well as hitting at the peak of his toss. And we'll go ahead and pause right at the top, right there. We'll draw another line and then go ahead and go forwards. And his is very close to the peak as well. This is kind of similar to Sam Groth or maybe even a Dolgopolov, just a couple of inches, very, very close to the very top of the toss. So again, full speed, it'd be super easy to assume that this is at the very peak. And it just about is. It's only dropping just a couple of inches. So super fast rhythm from Sam. And definitely part of what makes his serve unique and what allows him to get so much more power than so many other players. And Top Tennis Training, by the way, has done some fantastic analysis of other fast rhythm servers. Like Kyrgios was a recent lesson that they had, that they did a fantastic job of explaining why that lack of pause and waiting allows him to transition through his serve so much more powerfully and transfer so much energy up into the ball. There's no question there's pros to keeping the rhythm and keeping the timing moving at a very fast rate, like Sam Groth or Kyrgios or Dolgopolov. Now we're going to look at two quick old school examples, and this first one is Arthur Ashe, somebody that several players brought up. This is from 1975 Wimbledon, and we'll do the exact same thing here for Arthur. We'll pause right at the peak of the toss, right here, just before it's starting to drop. We'll draw a line right across the ball. My line tool is struggling here, but you see the red, and I'll go ahead and continue forwards with the serve. There's contact right there. So I'd say about 6 inches or so, maybe 6 or 7 inches of drop from Arthur Ashe. Definitely beautiful, flowing service motion, super classic. Love seeing the serve and volley. And now finally, one of the most requested players to take a look at, Roscoe Tanner. He retired in, I think, the mid or early 80s, and this is a clip from him playing Borg in 1979. Well, go ahead, go to the screen, check out his motion here, and when he makes contact, I'll just go frame by frame. There's contact right there. He is definitely the only player suggested in the comments, the only player that I've ever looked at that he's making contact, it looks like, with the ball still rising, very close to the peak of the toss, but on the way up. And so he wins the award by far. I went through and checked just about every name that was dropped in the comments. Roscoe Tanner definitely wins the championship as far as quickest motion, or at least the timing between his arm motion and his tossing motion going up towards the point of contact. And so he still gets obviously he was a world-class player, still gets a full racket drop, still full range of motion with his arm and shoulder, and makes contact with the ball on the way up. So very, very quick. If I play this in full motion, you'll see super quick motion here. And by far the earliest in the toss that he makes contact. Super impressive to be able to time that. And that really brings me to my final thoughts here. I understand that we don't want to be halted and paused and stopped and having to restart momentum again. And that's the whole argument against a high toss. And I don't want anybody to be stuck standing there waiting for the ball to come down like a Sharapova, somebody who has a super huge toss that is dropping a really long distance. And there's no question it's more difficult to time when it's falling by 3, 4, or 5 feet in the air, which some players do. But it's also super difficult to time when you're trying to move through your motion so quickly that you're trying to catch the ball on the way up or at the very peak. Even among the players that everybody said, oh, this person hits at the peak, this person hits at the peak, they're allowing the ball to drop at least a couple of inches, and a lot of times 6 or 8 inches before they make contact. And those are just the ones that everybody thought was hitting at the top. The players who are comfortably letting it drop, it's 1.5 feet or 2 feet. And so for me, anywhere in that whole spectrum between a couple of inches and several feet is completely fine, as long as the fundamental technique and mechanics and framework of the rest of the service motion is super, super solid. I don't think it's critical that the toss is hit at any certain point, as long as it works well with the flow and the efficiency of the rest of the motion. So thanks to everybody who really participated here, left comments. It was a lot of fun to go back, check out clips of other players. If you can think of anybody else, leave your comments down below and let me know what your thoughts are. Is this surprising to you? What other thoughts do you have related to toss height and some of these old school and also new school players that have a wide range of different rhythms to their serve?